There is a date that explains more about American financial behavior than any budget meeting, any credit counseling session, or any panicked call to a financial advisor. It is August 15th, 1971. On that Sunday evening, President Richard Nixon addressed the nation and announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars into gold at a fixed rate. The Bretton Woods system, the post-war architecture of global finance, was dead. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the American psyche. Money was no longer tied to something physical, something you could hold. It became floating, abstract, untethered. It became a number on a screen that could be printed infinitely. And if money itself had no fixed anchor, why should your relationship to it be anchored in anything but the present? The system changed, the incentives changed, and American behavior followed. The question is not why individuals fail at long-term planning. The question is why we ever expected them to succeed in a system designed for the short term. By the end of this, you will understand the three forces that have hardwired short-term thinking into American financial behavior: the incentive architecture, the psychology of scarcity, and the education gap. You will see how the very tools designed to help, tax breaks, retirement accounts, financial products, often mask deeper problems. And you will understand why, in a nation with $18.8 trillion in household debt and a savings gap that widens by the year, the inability to plan for the future is not a moral failing. It is a predictable, almost mathematical outcome of the environment we've built. Let's start with the most counterintuitive truth. The American financial system does not actually reward long-term saving. It rewards the appearance of it. Consider the tax-favored retirement account, the 401k, the cornerstone of American retirement planning. It is popular, with roughly half of working adults participating. But here is the uncomfortable question. Does it actually increase saving, or does it just rearrange it? The evidence is murky. Research suggests that tax incentives only increase private saving if households finance their contributions through reduced consumption, if they actually spend less today to save more for tomorrow, if they instead shift existing assets into these accounts or borrow to contribute. The net effect on national saving is zero. For high-income households, this is precisely what happens. They have sufficient wealth in other forms, so the accounts become tax shelters, not engines of new saving. The incentive works for the wealthy because they were already going to save. For middle and lower income households, the math is different. They might genuinely need the nudge. But here's the catch. Those households are also the ones most likely to face an immediate pressing need for cash today. The tire blows out, the kid needs braces, the hours get cut, and suddenly that long-term saving becomes short-term borrowing. The system offers a tax break for saving, but it offers nothing for the emergencies that make saving impossible. This is the first layer of the architecture. The tools assume a stability that no longer exists. They were designed for an era of lifetime employment, steady wage growth, and predictable expenses. That era is gone. Today, nearly two-thirds of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Less than half could cover a $1,000 emergency from savings. 28% have nothing saved for the future at all. In that environment, a tax deferral 30 years from now is an abstraction. The rent due on the first of the month is reality, and reality always wins. Which brings us to the second force, the psychology of scarcity. Behavioral economics has a name for what happens when resources are tight: tunneling. When people feel financially squeezed, their cognitive bandwidth narrows. They focus on the immediate problem, the bill due Friday, the grocery run tomorrow, and the future fades from view. This is not a character flaw. It is a neurological response to stress, and it has measurable consequences. Research shows that nearly 68% of Americans underestimate their retirement needs, with particularly alarming gaps for middle-income families. Two biases drive this: present bias, which weights today's pleasures and pains more heavily than tomorrow's, and optimism bias, which assumes things will work out somehow. Together, they reduce average retirement savings by more than 4% per year. That is the silent tax of human psychology, compounded annually. But here is the paradox, the twist that undermines the moralizing lectures about discipline. Optimism, it turns out, actually helps. Studies show that people who are optimistic save more than pessimists, significantly more. Among lower-income individuals, the effect is even stronger. Optimism allows people to visualize a positive future and save toward it. Pessimism makes the future feel pointless. So the very bias that causes people to underestimate risk also gives them the emotional fuel to save it all. The system needs optimists to participate, even if their optimism leads them to miscalculate. The irony is quiet but devastating. Accurate pessimists would save appropriately, but they also might not bother, because what's the point? Then there is the question of what happens when nudges fail. Automatic enrollment in retirement plans has been hailed as a miracle of behavioral economics. Make saving the default, and participation soars. It works beautifully for white-collar workers with stable jobs and payroll departments. But a field experiment testing the same logic on low-income tax filers found something different. When a portion of their tax refund was automatically directed to savings bonds unless they opted out, it had no impact. Zero. The reason? These filers had targeted plans for their refunds. They needed the money now for things they had already postponed. The nudge works when there is slack in the system. When there is no slack, no nudge is strong enough. The third force is the one we talk about most and understand least: financial literacy. It is not just knowing what a stock is. It is understanding compound interest, risk diversification, inflation's erosion of purchasing power. By these measures, Americans are not doing well. In a 2025 assessment, only 49% of U.S. adults demonstrated basic financial literacy. Those who scored poorly were twice as likely to be debt-constrained, 3 times more likely to be financially fragile, 5 times more likely to lack sufficient non-retirement savings, and 8 times more likely to spend 20 hours a week or more worrying about money. The cost of ignorance is not just missed opportunity. It is chronic, grinding stress. The response has been a wave of state-level mandates for financial education in high schools. 41 states now require some form of personal finance instruction for graduation. The logic is sound. Earlier exposure correlates with higher credit scores and lower delinquency rates in adulthood, but there is a gap between policy and reality. In states without requirements, only 1 in 10 students takes a personal finance course before graduating. And even in states with mandates, the quality varies wildly. Some require a standalone semester course. Others embed financial literacy in broader social studies requirements. Some have rigorous teacher training. Others let any licensed teacher handle it, regardless of expertise. The student member of the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education put it simply: you're thrown into adulthood without knowing the basics. That is the quiet tragedy. The system expects young adults to navigate complex financial decisions: student loans, credit cards, first apartments, retirement contributions, with less formal preparation than they receive for driver's education. And then it calls them irresponsible when they struggle. Now zoom in on the generation that has become the avatar for this struggle: millennials. As of early 2025, the average millennial 401k balance stood at roughly $67,300. The median was even lower, around $65,000. To understand why, you have to understand the timeline they inherited. The oldest millennials entered the workforce just before or during the Great Recession. Their early careers were marked by stagnant wages, high unemployment, and the slowest recovery in generations. They carry the heaviest student debt burden of any age cohort, delaying saving for decades. Then came the pandemic, with its disruptions, pauses, and emergency withdrawals. Compare them to the generations ahead. Gen X averages $192,300 in 401k savings. Baby boomers average $249,300. The gap is not entirely explained by age. It is explained by history. Millennials started later, earned less, and carried more debt. The miracle is not that their savings are modest. The miracle is that they are saving it all. And yet, there are signs of adaptation. Contribution rates among millennials have risen, averaging around 13% of salary when including employer matches. That approaches the 15% benchmark often recommended. They are using Roth options, gradually increasing contributions, learning the game, but the game has gotten harder. Total household debt now stands at $18.8 trillion. Delinquencies are at their highest level in nearly a decade, with 4.8% of outstanding debt in some stage of delinquency. The ground is shifting under their feet. Zoom out now, and the picture becomes geopolitical. A nation that cannot save for the long term is a nation that cannot invest in the long term. The capital that should flow into productive enterprise, into infrastructure, into research and development, instead gets consumed by debt service and emergency spending. The savings gap is not just a personal problem, it is a strategic vulnerability. Consider the federal government's own data. Household net worth hit a record $181.6 trillion in late 2025, driven largely by rising equity markets. But averages obscure. The gains have gone disproportionately to those at the top, those already holding assets. Meanwhile, participation in retirement plans among workers earning between $15,000 and $50,000 dropped from 58% in 2022 to just under 53% in 2024. Their savings rates fell, their contributions declined. The wealthy saved more, the middle class saved less, the gap widened. This is the uncomfortable arithmetic. Tax incentives for retirement saving cost the federal government significant revenue each year. If that revenue simply subsidizes saving, that would have happened anyway. It is a transfer, not an investment. If it fails to reach those who need it most, it is a subsidy for the comfortable. The policy and the outcome are disconnected. So where does this leave us? The American difficulty with long-term money planning is not a mystery. It is the predictable result of a system that offers incentives misaligned with reality, a psychology shaped by scarcity and stress, and an education system that equips students for everything except the one thing they will face every day for their entire adult lives: managing money. The moralizing lectures about discipline and responsibility miss the point. The question is not why individuals fail. The question is why the system is designed to make success so hard. There is a deeper question, too, one that lingers after the data fades. In a world where the future feels increasingly uncertain, where climate shifts, political instability, and technological disruption make long-term forecasting feel like guesswork, is the inability to plan for the future actually irrational? If the ground is shifting, maybe the wise strategy is to stay light on your feet, to keep resources liquid, to live for today because tomorrow is illegible. Maybe the optimists who save are betting on a future that won't arrive. And maybe the pessimists who spend are just more honest about the odds. If this perspective shifted how you see the financial pressures of our time, like the video and subscribe. We break down the hidden systems of economics, psychology, and power, free from moralizing, focused on how things actually work. In the comments, tell us, in a world this uncertain, what does smart planning even look like?